The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back to the show. This episode is part of our new Empathy Expansion Kit series. I'm Steven Sakash here once again with Tullio Siragusa.
Hello, everyone.
One of our main goals of our podcast is to help you be a more authentic business or build a more authentic work life. One of the best ways to do that is build empathy and love into what you do. In this series, we're diving into some bite-sized topics to build empathy into your work life. Today, we talk about laying the foundations, empathy in your organizational DNA. So basically how to embed empathy into the core values and the operational structure of your business from its inception or as it grows. So a couple of key areas here for me I want to dive into first. The first is sort of the practice we do in our operations, and that's our BLIS practice. So BLIS stands for Build Love Into Scalable Systems. So making that part of a practice is something that, we continually look for opportunities to add love into what we do. So over time, you just start stacking little changes on top of little changes. And after a while, you look back 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and suddenly now you've built this more empathetic, loving business. And it doesn't have to be something where you've got this real specific agenda or this real specific outline of here's what we're going to do. You can just do it even at your own desk right now. Whatever you're doing, you can figure out a way to add love into what you're doing. And then the key here is to see if you can systemize it. So culture gets stretched when you're growing and scaling a business. You don't want to systemize the wrong things. You want to systemize the right things. So that's what this is about, that's why building love into scalable systems, why it's important to think of it that way. It's a very simple business mantra, something we've been doing for years and years. And it's just helped us get to where we want to go internally. Tullio, I know you've kind of jumped into our culture here recently. Your thoughts on our BLIS approach?
Well, first of all, I love it because there's a commitment to creating an environment where people feel heard, their needs are being met, and also it's an opportunity to grow as in an equivalence-based organization, where everyone's treated as adults with dignity. And everyone's expected to also be adults. So there's an accountability that comes into that. That's automatic when you treat people that way. And you spoke of something really interesting, what happens when you're scaling and you could lose some of that. And I'll tell you, I've gone through a number of post-M&A integrations, very large ones at that. One was almost 10,000 employees, 6 different companies coming together. And I'll never forget a few of the acquired company CEOs nominated me to be the global CMO to put this thing together. And I accepted the challenge, but it was like the CEO was like, okay, let's come up with a new name and rebrand ourselves. And I was like, wait a minute, slow down a second. We just have thousands of people coming together who had their own culture and their own ways of doing things. The name's not going to put us all together. We have to redefine who we are as a business. What do we stand for as a company? And it was a commitment to do that. And maybe that's why some of the other CEOs sort of voted for me to take on that role, because they knew that I would take that approach. I was like, we need to define who we are and let the employees define it collectively so that when we step into this new brand, we step into it together. No one feels like the conquered or the losers or the acquired. That's a horrible feeling. But we all step into this new entity with new defined values that we did as an organization, as a joint organization together. And it took a little time. It took a little over a year to do that. So we did that first. And then we started to use the input of all the people to define the new name of the company, the logo, the color scheme, all these other nuances, right, that everyone also participated in. But I'll never forget how empowering it was for all the employees to feel like they were part of this new entity being co-created together. No one needed to be sold on this new change. No one needed to be, tons of communication that happens. Well, who are we now? What are our values now? There's so much effort that happens when it's top down that organizations spend even more time trying to convince everyone that the top guys made a good decision, right? It didn't work that way. Everyone made that decision collectively. So no one could say, why do we choose that? Well, we chose that together as the employees chose that. And I remember distinctively the executives were the last to give input. And it was on purpose. I wanted to make sure it was represented by the employee base. And I've done it a few times since then. And it's just a beautiful way to really live this idea of building empathy into the organization. Because what's really what it is just respecting and letting people feel like they're heard and they're validated and that they matter. And what a wonderful way to create the kind of DNA where the employees contribute regularly to the success of the business. This was just a good foundational moment, and it continued, obviously. And it's one of the organizations that's best places to work globally. And it's not a surprise why they're that way.
So the key, I think, it's that bottom-up approach and versus the top-down. So when you see like these purpose statements, these company purpose statements, mission statements, where it's something like to build shareholder or investor value or something like that, it's just, yeah, it's this very top-down sort of approach, and it's certainly not inspiring, and it's also going to potentially get you into a lot of trouble if that's your North Star, right? Because, you know, all kinds of problems are just going to be justified in the name of that. So yeah, you're re-examining. I think that's a huge thing, is just to re-examine your company's purpose. You know, its mission statement, its purpose statement, and see what's in there. Is this something that takes this more empathetic approach where it's considering, you know, all stakeholders and their opinions and their values? Tullio, I mean, I think we've looked at thousands of businesses, and very few have sort of empathy or something related to that in these business descriptions about them. Doesn't it feel like there's just a big disconnect between the workforce and leadership when you don't have something like that?
Huge disconnect. Here's the staggering stat is that we found about 10%, actually less than 10% of mid-sized companies had some kind of people-first, human-centric, design thinking, empathy-based principles into their business models. That means that 90% or more of the companies out there are operating top-down, command and control with highly disengaged employees. No surprise why many organizations have 80% of the employees disengaged. I wouldn't be engaged in an organization that doesn't hear what I have to say. They just tell me what to do. So, you know, it's not surprising. But those organizations that operate this way or have some of the best, most creative, innovative people that work there. And they have longevity as well with the people that work there. So they have lower churn, higher satisfaction, and it transcends beyond just the employees. The clients, the customers are more satisfied, and even investors are more satisfied, because ultimately when you put people first, everything else realigns. But there's definitely significant room for improvement. And it's not a difficult thing to do. And we've talked about this in other podcasts for those who are like, yeah, you know, very just focus on the numbers. There's actually proof positive points that indicates that when you move in this direction, you'll be significantly more profitable, grow at a significantly higher rate. I mean, 10x or more easily. So it's good for the business, but ultimately it's about people. If you don't take care of people and create an environment where they feel empowered, your DNA will suffer. There is no DNA. It's just, you're robotic. It's like a machine. You know, everybody feels like a cog. So there's no DNA associated. It's not alive, right? So empathy brings an organization to life. It makes everybody feel part of this live organism that they all want to continue to make it thrive.
So operationalizing empathy is kind of the key here. What can we do here? We can develop, you know, these new purpose statements together. We can develop these new mission statements, things like that. But I think also you've got a check off list of a whole bunch of other things. You got like ongoing learning. You've got your customer interaction, you know, guidelines, templates, you know, response templates that reflect your values, your empathy. Look at the different stakeholders of your business. So you got your employees. So that's what we're talking about, ongoing learning. Customers, you know, so how can we act empathetically and build a more authentic relationship to that. Your vendors, same thing. How can we work with them on a better way? There's a lot of different tools here, and we've covered some of these in past podcasts. So check out some of the titles of our past podcasts. We've gone into these issues in depth for an hour. But that's it for today's episode of our Empathy Expansion Kit series. We'll see you on the next Bliss Business Podcast.